She was the woman who shattered his heart, then disappeared without a single goodbye. Years later, she walked back into his life, not alone, but holding the hand of a little girl whose eyes looked painfully familiar. What she whispered next brought the toughest cowboy in town to his knees. Stay until the end, because this unforgettable Wild West story proves that love lost isn't always love gone forever. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming Wild West stories filled with love, sacrifice, and second chances. The summer sun hung high above the quiet frontier town of Black Creek, warming the dusty streets where horses clopped lazily past the wooden storefronts. For nearly 8 years, Ethan Carter had lived the same life every single day. At 42, the rugged cowboy had earned a reputation as one of the hardest working ranchers in the valley. His weathered hands had built fences, broken horses, and rescued neighbors during storms, yet nothing he accomplished ever managed to mend the wound left by one woman. 8 years earlier, Clara Bennett had promised she would stay forever. Instead, she disappeared before sunrise. She left behind nothing except an empty porch, an untouched engagement ring, and a heart Ethan believed would never trust again. People told him she had run away with a wealthy businessman traveling west. Others claimed she simply grew tired of frontier life. Eventually, Ethan stopped asking questions. He buried himself in work because work never abandoned anyone. That ordinary afternoon, Ethan guided his wagon into town to collect supplies from Miller's General Store. As he climbed down from the wagon, he noticed people staring toward the stagecoach station. Something unusual had happened. A woman stood beside the arriving coach wearing a faded blue frontier dress. One hand gripped a worn leather suitcase. The other held the tiny hand of a little blonde girl no older than 6. The child smiled at everything she saw. The woman did not. She looked frightened, exhausted, as though every mile of the journey had stolen another piece of her strength. Ethan almost walked away. Then the wind lifted her bonnet. His heart stopped. Clara. The name escaped his lips before he could stop it. She slowly turned. Their eyes met for the first time in 8 years. Neither moved, neither spoke. The noise of the busy town disappeared. Only silence remained. The little girl looked up at Clara. "Mama, who's that man?" Clara's lips trembled. "He used to be my best friend." Ethan swallowed hard. Best friend, not the man she once promised to marry. Not the man whose future she had destroyed. Pain rushed back with terrifying force. He forced himself to speak calmly. "I thought I'd never see you again." Clara lowered her eyes. "I know. I've wanted to explain," Ethan interrupted gently. 8 years is a long explanation. The little girl looked between them, confused by the sadness she couldn't understand. Clara knelt beside her. "Emily, sweetheart, would you wait right here?" The child nodded obediently. Clara stepped closer to Ethan. "I never stopped regretting the day I left." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You had 8 years to write one letter." Tears formed in Clara's eyes. "I wasn't allowed." Those 4 words struck Ethan harder than anger ever could. Before he could ask what she meant, the old stagecoach driver approached. He placed Clara's second suitcase on the ground. Quietly, he looked toward Ethan. "If I were you," the elderly man said softly, "I'd listen before judging." Then he climbed back aboard and drove away. Ethan stared at Clara. For the first time, he noticed the sadness hidden behind her eyes, the bruised memories she carried, the quiet fear she tried desperately to hide. And somehow, his anger began fighting against something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The silence between Ethan and Clara lasted longer than either expected. Finally, Ethan picked up both of her heavy suitcases without saying a word and loaded them into his wagon. Clara looked surprised. "You don't have to help me," she whispered. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "I'm helping the little girl." Emily climbed into the wagon with an innocent smile, unaware of the painful history between the two adults. As they rode toward Ethan's ranch, the little girl happily pointed at horses, wildflowers, and distant mountains, while Clara remained quiet, gathering the courage to tell the truth she had carried for 8 long years. That evening, after Emily had fallen asleep beside the fireplace wrapped in a warm blanket, Clara finally spoke. "The man everyone thought I ran away with wasn't my choice." Ethan looked up. My father owed him a fortune. He threatened to take our home and send my younger brothers into the mines if I refused to marry him. Ethan's jaw tightened. I came to your cabin that night to tell you everything, but he found me first. He forced me onto the stagecoach before sunrise. I wasn't allowed to write. Every letter I tried to send was burned before it ever left the house. Tears rolled down Clara's face. I never stopped loving you. Oh, Ethan's heart pounded. For years he had believed she had abandoned him willingly. Now every rumor, every sleepless night, every ounce of bitterness suddenly felt built upon a terrible lie. What happened to him? Ethan asked quietly. He died 2 years ago from illness. His debt swallowed everything. By the time I was free, I owned nothing except my daughter and 2 old suitcases. She lowered her head. I didn't come asking for love. I only wanted you to know I never betrayed you. At that moment, Emily stirred awake and wandered into the room, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Mama, are we leaving again tomorrow? Clara forced a smile. I don't know, sweetheart. Before she could say another word, Ethan knelt in front of the little girl. Do you like horses? Emily's eyes sparkled. They're my favorite. Then tomorrow, I'll introduce you to the gentlest horse on the ranch. The little girl wrapped her tiny arms around Ethan's neck without hesitation. For the first time in years, the lonely ranch house echoed with a child's laughter. Watching from across the room, Clara quietly wiped away her tears. Maybe hope hadn't disappeared after all. Maybe it had simply been waiting for the truth. Winter arrived early that year, covering Ethan's ranch with a blanket of white snow. But inside the once lonely farmhouse, warmth had returned. Emily's cheerful laughter filled every room as she followed Ethan around the barn, insisting on helping him feed the horses. Every evening, Clara prepared simple meals while the 3 of them gathered around the fireplace. For the first time in nearly a decade, Ethan found himself smiling without forcing it. Yet despite the growing happiness, Clara still carried one heavy burden. She believed she didn't deserve a second chance. One snowy morning, she quietly packed her 2 worn suitcases before sunrise. While Ethan and Emily slept, she placed a handwritten letter on the kitchen table. Thank you for giving us kindness when we had nowhere else to go. But I cannot ask you to carry my past forever. Emily deserves a peaceful future, and I don't want the town's gossip to become your burden. Goodbye, and thank you for loving us when you didn't have to. Holding back tears, Clara took Emily's hand and stepped onto the porch. Before they reached the gate, Ethan's voice echoed across the snowy yard. Clara, where do you think you're going? She froze. Slowly turning around, she saw Ethan standing in the doorway with the letter in one hand. Emily ran back toward him and hugged his legs tightly. I don't want to leave, the little girl cried. Ethan walked toward Clara until only a few steps separated them. 8 years ago, someone else decided our future, he said quietly. I'm not letting fear decide it again. Clara lowered her eyes. People will never forget. Ethan smiled gently, then let them talk. They weren't there when your heart was breaking. They weren't there when you spent years protecting your daughter, and they aren't the ones I want beside me. Tears streamed down Clara's face. After everything, you can still forgive me? Ethan slowly reached for her trembling hands. There was never anything to forgive. You didn't leave because you stopped loving me. You left because life gave you a choice no one should ever face. Emily looked up with hopeful eyes. Does this mean we can stay? Ethan knelt beside her with a warm smile. Only if you'll help me make this old ranch feel like a real home. The little girl threw her arms around both of them, laughing through happy tears. Months later, when spring returned to the valley, the lonely ranch looked completely different. Fresh flowers surrounded the porch Clara had repaired herself. Children's laughter echoed across the fields as Emily chased baby lambs through the pasture. Neighbors who once whispered now smiled whenever they visited. They had watched Ethan and Clara build something stronger than gossip. Trust, forgiveness, and love. One warm evening, Ethan led Clara to the large oak tree overlooking the ranch. It was the very place where he had once planned to ask her to marry him years before everything fell apart. This time, he removed a small wooden box from his coat. Inside rested the same engagement ring he had never thrown away. "I kept hoping," he admitted softly, "even when I told myself I had stopped." Clara covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes again. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. "Welcome home, forever." She wrapped her arms around him as Emily clapped happily nearby, calling them both her family. The broken hearts that had once been separated by pain were finally healed, not because the past disappeared, but because love proved stronger than it. And on that peaceful frontier ranch, where hope had once seemed impossible, three lonely souls discovered that sometimes the greatest miracles don't erase yesterday. They simply give tomorrow a brand new beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Until next time, God bless, and we'll see you in another unforgettable Wild West story.